Welcome to the From Burnout to Recovery show with your host, Dr. Kate. This is where your journey to burnout recovery starts. Are you feeling overwhelmed or like work has become unmanageable? Join me and my guests for open and honest conversations about burnout recovery from the comfort of the front porch. I am here to help you build your resilience and prepare you for burnout in a whole new way through a variety of perspectives. Move past the idea that burnout can only be addressed by avoidance and work to integrate recovery into your daily life. Relax, take a breath. The From Burnout to Recovery show starts now. Hello, and welcome to the From Burnout to Recovery show with Dr. Kate on Transformation Talk Radio and member of the Cornelius Stephanie Media Group. I am your host, Dr. Kate, and I am excited to welcome you to the show today. Remember, as you are enjoying the show, if you haven't yet, be sure to hit that subscribe button and leave a review. You can also download the KS Media Group app for all the world's best influencers in one place. Today, we are going to be joined by our guest, Kyira Wackett. She is a licensed mental health therapist, facilitator, and creator. She lives in Portland, Oregon with her husband, Jordan, and her daughter, Everly. She is the owner of Adversity Rising, where she equips people with the confidence and skills to write their own story. She also sees patients in private therapy practice, treating eating disorders, anxiety disorders, and trauma. She has been speaking on topics related to mental health and well-being for over 10 years and focuses on balancing insight and action to create meaningful and sustainable change. Her specialties lie in communication, boundary setting, distress tolerance, forgiveness, self-care for yourself and others, and cognitive reframe and empowerment. She believes that all of us have the capacity to author our own stories and relinquish the holds of shame, fear, and anxiety if we learn to do the hard work, sit in the discomfort to face our true selves, and trust the process. Kyira, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, I am really thrilled to be able to have this conversation with you. And I know you'll share a little bit more about your story here in a moment, but I think anytime that we can address the concepts of shame, fear, and anxiety is so incredibly important when it comes to the burnout space. But with that, let's hear a little more from you. If you would tell us a little more about your own experience with burnout and your journey to recovery.
Yeah, I think when I was first, I saw your photo, and when I first went to your website, I was just so taken by the safety that your energy brought into the place. And so I found myself really thinking about burnout in a different way. And, I think many of us working in any sort of clinical capacity in the last few years of the pandemic have probably had to hear or say the word burnout 10 dozen times.
Right.
But in kind of thinking about this and like preparing for today, I think burnout became synonymous with just daily living for me as a kid. Mm-hmm. So I was a parentified child. I had a mom who was undiagnosed with some pretty severe mental health issues. And as a way of kind of managing what we didn't know at the time was bipolar disorder, she struggled with some pretty severe substance use. And so I kind of became her parent at like 8 or 9 years old. I had to kind of take care of everything, take care of her, take care of me. And I needed to alleviate any possible kind of stressor for her. That became my role. And I don't know so much if that was what she intentionally put on me, if that was my response to the trauma of having a mom struggling with substance use. Eventually I moved into a variety of different family homes. But I think it was the only way I knew how to try to manage a situation that maybe felt out of control. Mm-hmm. And so kind of at that time from, 8, 9, 10 into early adulthood, the storyline I had is my job is to make sure I can take care of everything at all costs. Mm-hmm. And I think I was maybe better at it than some people. Like, I think it was a natural skill I had, but then I obviously honed the craft. So I think kind of a double whammy of it becoming this thing. I'm so good at it, so I should be able to do it. And that led me to, I think, this lifelong pursuit of perfection seeking. And it was a lot of, this is what you need to do in order to be good enough, to be worthy, to be accepted. And I think, kind of coupled with this idea of trying to make up for everything going on with my mom, think about middle school, high school times when all of us are suddenly being faced with, well, these are the rules of how you fit in here. So that I think kind of all came together at the same time. So I was like, okay, so this is what I have to do to take care of my mom. This is where she's at. This is what's happening. This is how I have to take care of the rest of my family. This is how I don't become a burden on the family members I'm staying with. And then I still have to play this game to fit in here. And so, I kind of imagine there's one of the pictures in the Cat in the Hat book where there's like a million things tossed up in the air and something's going to fall. Yeah. I think that became the existence that was normalized, and I touted it as ideal. I don't know if this was the same case for you, but when I first even started doing resumes at like 16, they told us to write multitasking as a skill on there. That was touted as this good thing. And so I think the foundation for burnout was kind of ripe within me that whole time. And I wasn't realizing it, but my body and my emotional self were just constantly trying to ask for time off, and I wouldn't give it to it. And so I had a lot of chronic health issues. I ended up developing a pretty severe eating disorder in my early 20s, struggled with some pretty paralyzing PTSD symptoms. And that was seemingly would have been enough to kind of slap me in the face to be like, something's not, your body needs something, your soul needs something, your brain needs something. But I think kind of where the cusp of all this comes together when you mentioned shame, fear, burnout all in one bucket is now you've been existing this way for so long that it felt like addressing and even naming that I'm burnt out felt synonymous with saying I'm a failure and I'm unworthy. And so it probably honestly wasn't until even a few years ago that I was even willing to use that language and to say that I've lived in a state of burnout. And even as a therapist, I've almost perpetuated it as an ideal early on of, I can see patients from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. What are you talking about?
Right.
And then realizing that none of those things were allowing me to live any sort of life that I felt connected to. And then having to be willing to admit that the journey to kind of facing that meant being incredibly uncomfortable in a state of fear and having to learn to kind of dismantle everything I ever thought I knew about connection to allow the possibility I could be connected to myself and to the world for different values and different characteristics.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. I think the piece that I'm most drawn to right now in this moment is, and it hit me a couple of times, the thought that we have that multitasking is a skill we want. And it is like the ideal. And I know for me, like knowing like how I figured out like how I actually work, how I'm actually able to get things done, multitasking is not something that is actually a benefit to me at all. It really just creates more distraction. And so I think, that it's so an opposite of what we've been told is the ideal is a really interesting concept to me.
Yeah. Well, I think about it too, as multitasking is kind of being a form or a behavioral response to distress intolerance. And this idea of, distress is really created when we want to be anywhere but here. So it's, typically we feel distress when it's an emotion or an experience that feels negative or bad or whatever sort of charged word we want to put to it. So I want to be somewhere else. Yeah. And I think multitasking is this way of dealing with the distress of trying to do everything else besides what's happening in the moment. And I think about it a lot of, I think when it at least kind of got birthed in my life was around how, we talk about our core beliefs and our rules of existing and the way that we show up in the world. Well, all the different systems of rules of, even just let's go back to, again, that middle school, high school stage where I started it of how do you look a certain way, act a certain way, get a certain number of grades, be in all the right groups, do all the right things, be, all these different roles you have to have. You can't do them all and do them all well unless you're trying to do them all at the same time, which we know logically that means you're not going to do any of them well. But I think it's this pressure of like, oh, shoot, there's one more thing. And if I'm doing this, then I have to make sure I'm also doing this. And so I think it it just is a way of trying to deal with this constant distress that we feel, of kind of this looming fear of, I am not enough.
Mm-hmm. Kind of thinking about how, the childhood experience and how this has come across in your, adulthood, and then with your practice and realizing that, oh, maybe I can't see clients, all day long
Mm-hmm.
in that aspect. What were some of the points that you first started recognizing that this wasn't working anymore?
I think the biggest thing that I started to realize was how I was showing up in relationships,
mm-hmm.
whether that was professional relationships, like my clients, or even, peers, other therapists, or working as a speaker or facilitator, kind of being out in those spaces, but also just my personal relationships. And I was realizing that I was miserable and lonely more times than not. And it was because of this kind of overvaluing of doing and an inability to just sort of be. As you asked that question, I remember there was, I forget what Jay-Z album it was, but I came home from work one day and I opened up the door, and my now husband, he was my boyfriend, whatever at the time, is laying on our couch listening to music, listening to the new Jay-Z album, doing nothing else. And I walked in, I was like, what are you doing? He's like, listening to music. And I was like, no, I know, but what are you doing? He's like, I'm listening to music. And I was like, no, I get that. I hear the album, great album. What are you doing? He's like, Keira, I am listening to music. And I was like, I have never done that in my life. Who does that? Who sits and just listens to music? Like, you don't have anything else happening. And I think these brief little moments of realizing that I was missing out on the opportunity to just be. Mm-hmm. And then I think it was the willingness to admit that the drive to do it all is synonymous with becoming incredibly selfish, not in a way that we intentionally do it. Mm-hmm. We're not trying to make it all about us, but the tunnel gets so small and the focus gets so specific on what we need to do that we lose sight of how we want to show up and who we want to be in the world, because we're in pursuit of this very specific goal. And I think that was the biggest thing I became aware of how I showed up. Yeah.
That is incredibly powerful, I think, in that context and how you were showing up in relationships. But I think even more so the recognition that in not being able to just be and to always be striving for, those checkpoints and those kind of things creates that selfishness is, right. I think, a really interesting, powerful thought to this. So when you started kind of recognizing the space of like, okay, I'm not allowing these spaces to be or to simply listen to the music, how did you start? Was it kind of an immediate, like, I want to start doing this for myself, or was there more of a process to giving yourself space?
I mean, it's definitely a process, but I think I'm only maybe 5% of the way through right now.
Right. Well, I think we're all in process and trying to figure this out. But
I think what it was so right soon after that time, actually, it must have been like 2011 was around like the Jay-Z album experience, because I noticed it and then I didn't really do much with it. I was like, okay. And my husband at the time was in medical school. Mm-hmm. And so by nature of his work, he was had to be selfish in different ways. So it kind of allowed the possibility at home that I could keep being sort of in these productivity pursuits. Right. So, all right, well, I can still handle all this stuff. I can do these things. And then it became, I remember at one point, my now sister-in-law was like, why are you packing his lunches? He's, like 25 or whatever. He can make his own food. I'm like, no, because I can do this, this, and this. And she's like, but do you have to? And I remember these questions. Mm-hmm. And then I would say the thing you need to say to make everybody else like, oh no, I got it. Thank you so much. It's super helpful. And then I'd go right back to doing it. And then my cousin, who I had grown up with, he was a couple of weeks younger than me. We went to school together all through high school. He was killed. And after that happened, he was like the opposite of me. He had gone to school to be an educator. He just wanted to be with little kids all day long. He's the type of person that would I always thought it was fake, but it wasn't. I realized it wasn't, but it was so opposite of what I did. Like, he would go to the high school basketball game or just go talk to people and listen when they talked. Like he just was present wherever he was. And I had this sort of moment after he died where I thought about how his life was so simple in the best way possible. He had been clear on what he valued, and all of his values were rooted inside of him. He could care less about any of, follows on social media, how much money he made, the accolades of, he played sports in college, and he never cared about being the best. He just wanted to do things that brought him joy and made the world better. And I think that became probably the most stark reality of this person that was living such a different life than me and is now gone. And I think then the sort of existential reality of like life is short and death is inevitable kind of made me start to think about, is this the life that I want to lead? And am I constantly setting myself up to be when I do this, then I'll be happy. When I do this, then I'll be good enough. And if I do that, am I ever going to reach a point where I would feel better? And I think kind of simultaneously, I was going through treatment for my eating disorder, and I was seeing the needle moving there. If you weigh this much, if you do these behaviors, if you do these things, if you look this way, well, that never was consistent. And so I think I started to have these very honest conversations with myself. And then I thought, okay, I need to start to learn to get comfortable trusting that maybe people could find me worthy and valuable if I didn't do X. If I wasn't famous, I might still be able to make a change in people's lives. If I wasn't the best therapist on the planet, I might still be a really great therapist that can help some people. And so then it was just kind of a series of micro steps. And typically I think now of it kind of like I don't know what ride it is at the amusement park, but it's like a ship. I just remember like a ship swinging back and forth.
Yeah. The ship swing, I think is the only thing I can think of calling it right now. But yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
And it feels a little like that. Like now it's just like a little bit more of a mild swinging back and forth. Like I just, maybe about a month ago had another big slap in my face of like, oh, you did it. We got stuck in the ego again. We're chasing the burnout because of a scarcity mindset that I'm not doing enough. I'm not making enough. I'm not being enough. And so what's the invitation look like to come back and recenter? And how do you get more comfortable being in a constant state of discomfort, because that's what it means to learn how to show up in my daily life and not feel like I have to fix or change it to be okay.
Yeah. I like that piece of learning how to be in the discomfort and what that looks like. What are some strategies that you use for yourself to, support yourself in this space?
One of the things, and I talk about this a lot in my work, is that I feel like, and I'm sure you see this too, is we are a culture built on Band-Aid solutions. So what's the quick fix? What can I do right now to alleviate the stress? And those are often those very kind of avoidant goal strategies of just anywhere but here, which is again, I think kind of a way to deal with distress intolerance versus build distress tolerance. And so I think one of the biggest things that's helped me, honestly, is to find ways to use self-disclosure effectively with clients, to model how to talk about imperfections in a way to support growth. Because what I've done is I've allowed myself to see and create the narrative that my job isn't to be perfect. My job is to be open, to be humble, to be growing and learning. And I think that's helped a lot. I also think so my daughter was born about 2 weeks before the pandemic, which I think has been, again, that I'm thinking about the pirate ship swinging, like both sides. I have no idea what it would have been like to be a parent not in a pandemic. Right. So it's my only comparison point. But what I had to learn even with that is, so then I was working from home. So I would be 2 feet away from, my infant crying in the other room, needing something. Well, I'm on the call with somebody doing trauma therapy. And I'm thinking, okay, I've got to be the best mom while I'm also being the best therapist, at the same time going through my own healing process. And so one of the things I started to really focus on is when I'm kind of at the yellow flag point for burning out, is when I'm splitting my brain and doing that multitasking, but it might not be behaviorally, but it's this sort of cognitive thought. It's, I've got one thought in the other room with what's going on with my daughter. I've got one thought right here, listening to somebody's trauma story. I've got one thought outside, listening to my neighbor who's been doing construction for 10 months. And when is he going to stop? I've got all these things happening. And so I had to really learn how to not have to be setting a bar for what 100% looks like, but to say whatever I'm doing in this moment, I'm going to give whatever 100% looks like right now. So when I'm at work, I'm going to give 100% to work, so that when I'm with my daughter, I'm giving 100% to my daughter, and I'm going to allow that distress to show up when I'm thinking about the email I didn't respond to, or when I'm, hearing her laugh in the other room and I'm thinking about how I'm missing something in her life. I'm going to allow that to exist. And to say that is okay, because my job isn't to be at every single point or moment. My job is to be fully present in the moments I do get. Yeah. And I don't think that's so much a strategy for somebody as much as like a mindset shift of just thinking about, again, how do I stop chasing perfection, but give whatever 100% is in that given moment. And sometimes that means that a workday is, I got lost in reading some random news article now, and I didn't get as much quote unquote productive time done. Sometimes it looks very different. Sometimes it means I end early and I go take my daughter to the park because I feel like it. And that sort of, I think, reconnecting with my body and my emotional self to realize that it's telling me what it needs. Most of us, the reason why we feel burnt out is because we've kind of conditioned our brain and the cognitive part of ourselves to be in the driver's seat at all times, rather than learning how to let that be integrated with the rest.
Yeah. I think that piece, that mindset in regard to, being 100% there in the moments that we're present for, that are in front of us in those moments, I think is so important as a shift to support us in our burnout recovery. I also really liked that you brought up the concept of yellow flags, and I haven't necessarily thought about it in that regard. I always talk to folks about, recognizing your burnout or recognizing when you're getting toward that burnout place. But I really like the idea of when it like yellow flag, because that's kind of that earlier on piece where it's kind of like, okay, like pay attention. Yeah.
Yeah. I like so I think, for most people, when things are really, really good or really, really bad can be danger zones on both sides for burnout. And so typically when it feels really, really bad, it's like, okay, well, you're there, you're in the burnout
That's
point.
it. You're here. Yeah.
But sometimes it's like right before it, the events that we need to watch is when things feel really, really good. When I think about how many therapy clients have I had that they're like, oh, I feel a little bit better, I'm done, I don't need you anymore. And then they come back when they're in a state of crisis because it feels like, I got this, everything's fine. And so then all of that sort of energy gets put into those burnout risk behaviors. And so for me, I've learned that actually I'm at my best when I'm somewhere in the gray, when I feel kind of self-esteem neutral, body neutral, work neutral, and everything feels very neutral. When I've got thoughts of like, maybe today I'm the worst mom in the world or the best mom in the world or somewhere in the middle. And you kind of allow that sort of shifting. I think when I feel like I'm at that 100% is when I am in the danger zone to then do all the behaviors that lead me to the 0% mark. And so that's the other thing I've learned is, what are the moments that if I can recognize those with a curiosity and then recognize, so why, when I'm feeling really good, do I then seek more? And then really start to dig into, where did that come from? And how is that rooted in my shame? How is that rooted in core beliefs that, again, I'm constantly one step away from not being enough? And why is that still the dominant factor? And so I think once you kind of get to that point, you then start to recognize, okay, I'm at like a 2 or a 3. That means things are starting to ramp up. All right, what do I need to do here? Because I am way more likely to take feedback at that point than I am when I get to the 8, 9, or 10, when now the idea of admitting it, going back to 10 years ago, the idea of admitting it felt like I've failed everything. And that is a level of distress many of us don't have the skills and tools to deal with as effectively as we might at the 2 or 3 level.
Yeah, absolutely. that piece of, when we're at that high point or feeling really good and taking kind of doing all the things that can lead us to that burnout space and the idea that it's like, okay, I'm doing all the awesome things, I'll take on more. I think so many of us do that, and just kind of that natural inclination, like things are going really well, I can do all the things. And so sure, I'll take on these other things. But I think, listeners, as you're thinking about this, maybe find a way to give yourself a moment of pause in when you think, what else can I take on? And reflect on that, as Kyira was saying, in do I really need to? And what does that mean? And where is that coming from is so important. I have so many great insights that you have provided for us today. And listeners, if you are enjoying this, remember to subscribe and share this with a friend who may need to hear this as well. Kyira, if you were to offer one additional piece of advice to our listeners, what would that be?
I'm actually borrowing from Brené Brown, who just did an interview. I'm obsessed with Dax Shepard's Armchair Expert podcast.
Yes.
And he had Brené Brown back on recently to talk about Atlas of the Heart. And I don't remember the context in which they got to this conversation, but she talked about an anchoring question that she uses, because she's somebody, I think, very similar to how my brain works, of getting excited by all the things we could do and having to really learn how to extend that excitement long-term rather than try to take it all on at one time. And the question basically that she uses now that somebody said to her is, what do you want to be held accountable to? And I kind of think about that now as, who do I want to be held accountable to? And what do I want to be held accountable for? And so when I think about those things long-term, when I say yes to something, what am I saying no to? And are those in line with the values that I want to have? And as I started to make those shifts, I've learned that so much of my burnout comes from a scarcity mindset around doing enough, accumulating enough bullet points of success and money. And those are things that are conditioned in us in a very capitalistic, productivity-driven culture. So when I pause and I go, yeah, you would pay me really, really good to do this thing. And honestly, it would look really good from a professional standpoint that I do it. And it means I'm going to lose Tuesday morning dance class with my daughter. Gosh, am I willing to be accountable to you and this money, or to my daughter? And ultimately then, is saying yes to that in line with the values I want to live my daily life in? And if making change in the world is important to me, is that the only way that I can make change? And is making change at the expense of, in my case, my family, my daughter, is it worth it? And so that question's been pretty life-changing for me. So I think if people can hold that, who and what do I want to be held accountable to and for with each one of those decisions we're making and additions we're putting on our plate.
Yeah, that is fantastic. Who and what do we want to be accountable for? And I really like the piece of, if I'm saying yes, if I say yes to this, what other thing might I have to say no to in that piece? And in considering both of those in that alignment with your values is so incredibly important. Kyira, thank you so much for being on the show today. Where can our listeners find out more about you?
I would say going to my website's the best way. I made a decision a couple of years ago to get off social media. And so I'm actually very proud of myself that I stuck to that, because can be a wonderful tool. And for me, just turned out not to be the same. So really, I try to put everything on my website for people. So they can go to adversityrising.com. They can sign up for my email list. It's just adversityrising.com/email-list. And they can sign up for that. That's really where I send all news, updates, anything that people want to see. And we can put a link to it in the show notes. But I would say the biggest way that I'm trying to support people is through kind of small doses through my YouTube channel. So if people are interested in hearing more there, they could go there as well.
Beautiful. And we will have all those links for you that are there for you in the show notes, dear listeners. So Kyira, once again, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you.
What an awesome show so far with our guest, Kyira, and just loved hearing from her perspective and that aspect of when we take on too much and how easy it is to take on even more when we are feeling in that energetic space, and asking ourselves the question of, if I say yes to this, is it a no to something else? And that piece about values alignment is something that I'm really going to continue to think on and reflect on as I continue for my day. As we move into our recovery moment, one more reminder to subscribe, give us a 5-star, and leave a review. You can also find the podcast on the KS Media Group app. And so you want to download that because you can see everything from me, but also everything from all of the founders who are involved in that application. And you can learn lots of new and great things. So we're going to move into our recovery moment now, which is focused on wishing well-being for ourselves and others. All right, as we move into our recovery moment, make sure you are in a safe space and are able to get into a comfortable position and fully listen to our guided reflection on wishing well-being for ourselves and others. Let's begin by taking a moment to settle your body into a comfortable position. You may close your eyes or keep them slightly open with a soft focus looking downward a few feet in front of you. Allow your spine to lift and your shoulders to soften. Today, we will practice loving kindness. In this practice, we generate a wish of well-being for ourselves and for others. Take a full breath in and a long, slow breath out. Feel yourself seated and present in this moment. Let's begin by offering well wishes of well-being to ourselves. Today, we will use the following phrases. Though in the future, you may use whatever words are most meaningful for you. May I be well. May I be safe and free from suffering. May I be happy. Repeat these phrases and invite your heart to open to accept them. May I be well. May I be safe and free from suffering. May I be happy. Now bring to mind someone close to you that you care about deeply. Maybe a friend or a family member, perhaps a teacher or someone who's helped you. Imagine that person sitting in front of you right now. Think of what you wish for them. May you be well. May you be safe and free from suffering. May you be happy. Or in any other words that express your wish for them. Exactly what I'm looking. Imagine them receiving your wishes for well-being. Now bring to mind someone who's having a difficult time. who perhaps has experienced loss or is struggling with illness, or maybe having a hard time at work. Imagine that person sitting in front of you. May you be well. May you be safe and free from suffering. May you be happy. Or any other words that express what you wish for them. Now bring to mind someone you see regularly in your life, but for whom you haven't had much interaction with. Maybe you've never even spoken. Imagine that person sitting in front of you. May you be well. May you be safe and free from suffering. May you be happy. If you'd like to bring someone to mind whom you've had some difficulty and offer them the words, may you be well. May you be safe and free from suffering. May you be happy. Now, let's extend your wishes to everyone near you right now. May they be well. May they be safe and free from suffering. May they be happy. Think of your friends and your family. May they be well. May they be safe and free from suffering. May they be happy. Everyone you know, everyone who is a part of your life, may they be well. May they be safe and free from suffering. May they be happy. Extend your wishes beyond the place where you are, beyond the people you know, to extend over the entire earth, all people, all animals, all life. May all beings be well. May they be safe and free from suffering. May they be happy. Feeling the sense of well-wishing extending out from you in all directions. Notice how you feel in this moment, the sensations in your body, and the quality of your mind. And again, wish for yourself. May I be well. May I be safe and free from suffering. May I be happy. If you'd like, place a hand on your heart as you say these words to yourself. Breathing in fully and breathing out fully. Allow yourself to be present, complete, here. May I be well. May I be safe and free from suffering. May I be happy. If you'd like, whatever your experience was during this meditation, this practice offers benefits. Even if you weren't always able to feel the well wishes or experiencing some resistance, that's okay. Simply come back to your intention to practice and experience love and kindness in whatever way you were able, in whatever way feels right to you. Let's finish with a nice, full, deep breath in and a long, slow breath out. Remember, for more recovery moments, you can follow me at Dr. Kate Steiner on Instagram, and be sure to subscribe to the From Burnout to Recovery show on YouTube. I'm grateful to our guest, Kyira Wackett, and I'm grateful for each of you listening today. Thank you for joining us on the From Burnout to Recovery show with Dr. Kate on Transformation Talk Radio. I'm Dr. Kate, and I wish you peace, on your journey. Thank you for joining me on the front porch today. Remember that you can download your free Burnout to Recovery Reflection Journal on my website, drkatesteiner.com. Be well, my friends. Thank you for joining me, Dr. Kate, on the From Burnout to Recovery show, where you are starting your journey to burnout recovery. You are invited to join me on the front porch every second and fourth Friday of the month on transformationtalkradio.com to continue growing in resilience and integrating recovery into your daily life. If you would like to learn more or find out how to work with me, visit liftwellnessconsulting.com.